In 2019, a mycologist at the University of Helsinki named Jenna Perhonen logged over 300 kilograms of Laetiporus sulphureus, chicken of the woods, harvested from a single municipal forest over one season. When her department ran the nutritional analysis on dried specimens, the protein content came back at just over 23 grams per 100 grams of dry weight. Beef sits at 26. But here is where the comparison stops being fair to the beef. Perhonen's mushrooms cost her nothing. Not a cent for feed, not a cent for land, not a cent for slaughter or refrigeration. They grew on dead and dying oaks, pulled their energy from decomposing wood, and produced kilogram after kilogram of dense, protein-rich tissue in weeks. A single fruiting cluster can weigh over 20 kilograms. One tree, one season. Enough protein to replace a month of grocery store meat for a family of 4. The knowledge of how to find, identify, and prepare this mushroom is not new. It is ancient. Scandinavian settlers carried it. German foresters documented it in the 1700s. Slavic cultures across Eastern Europe built entire culinary traditions around seasonal wild fungi, treating the autumn forest the way most Americans treat a supermarket aisle. And if you pull up the USDA's own Food Data Central database right now, the nutritional profile is sitting right there. Public, verified, and almost completely ignored. Today, we are opening a vault that connects thousand-year-old foraging traditions to modern nutritional biochemistry to the deadwood sitting within walking distance of most homes in the Northern Hemisphere. And by the end of this video, you will know exactly how to identify, harvest, and prepare the most undervalued free protein source growing in your nearest forest. The story begins not in a laboratory, but in the birch and oak forests of medieval Eastern Europe. In what is now the Czech Republic, Poland, and Western Russia, mushroom foraging was not a hobby. It was a caloric pillar. Families passed identification knowledge down like a trade. Mothers teaching daughters which species fruited on beech versus oak, which appeared after the first autumn rain, which needed to be cooked for 20 minutes, and which could be eaten after 5. The Slavic word for mushroom hunting, haubazenie in Czech, grzybobranie in Polish, has no clean English equivalent because English-speaking cultures largely abandoned the practice. The forest was a seasonal pantry, and fungi were the protein course. This was not unique to Europe. Traditional Chinese medicine documented over 200 species of edible and medicinal fungi in the Shenong Ben Cao Jing, a pharmacological text dating to roughly 200 AD, including species we now classify as Grifola frondosa and Lentinula edodes, prized for their density and sustaining quality during famine periods. In Japan, matsutake foraging was so culturally embedded that harvest rights to specific forest areas were legally codified during the Edo period, passed between families for generations. Across the Pacific, and the pattern repeats, indigenous peoples of the Pacific Northwest, the Great Lakes region, and Appalachia all incorporated wild fungi into seasonal food systems, with puffballs, morels, and shelf fungi appearing in ethnobotanical records. This is not folklore. This is convergent nutritional biology. The same caloric truth discovered independently through observation, scarcity, and generational wisdom. Cultures separated by oceans and millennia all arrived at the same conclusion. The forest floor and the standing deadwood above it were producing reliable, dense, protein-bearing food season after season, without planting, without irrigation, and without cost. So what exactly is happening inside these organisms? The answer lives in fungal cell wall biology. Unlike plants whose structural rigidity comes from cellulose, fungi build their cell walls from chitin, the same nitrogen-rich polysaccharide found in crustacean shells. Chitin is roughly 6 to 7% nitrogen by mass, and nitrogen is the elemental backbone of amino acids. While every time a fungal organism constructs new tissue, every expanding hypha, every new reproductive structure, it is synthesizing nitrogen-dense material at a rate most plants cannot match. When researchers at the Chinese Academy of Agricultural Sciences published a comprehensive amino acid profile of 17 wild mushroom species in the Journal of Food Composition and Analysis, the results were striking. Chicken of the woods contained all 9 essential amino acids. Its leucine and lysine concentrations fell within the range considered adequate by World Health Organization standards. The protein digestibility corrected amino acid score placed several wild species in the same functional category as eggs and dairy. But here's the critical distinction that most nutrition discussions miss entirely. When you compare mushrooms to beef by fresh weight, the way most food labels work, mushrooms appear to lose badly. A fresh mushroom is roughly 90% water. 100 grams of fresh chicken of the woods might deliver only 3 to 4 grams of protein. Beef delivers 26, but that framing is deceptive. Dry the mushroom and the protein concentration jumps to between 20 and 30% of dry mass. Now factor in caloric density. 100 calories of dried wild mushroom delivers more protein than 100 calories of ground beef because the mushroom carries almost no fat. Per calorie per dollar per unit of environmental input, the mushroom wins decisively. Let that sink in for a moment. The modern validation of wild fungal protein has come not from the wellness industry, but from military research and food security science. In 2021, a landmark study published in Nature by researchers at the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research modeled the effects of replacing just 20% of beef consumption with fungal protein. The result, a 50% reduction in annual deforestation by 2050 and a proportional collapse in associated methane emissions. The study did not focus on exotic lab-grown alternatives. It focused on mycoprotein, protein derived from fungal biomass, because the production infrastructure was already mature and scalable. The Finnish military has incorporated wild foraged mushrooms into field rations and survival training protocols for decades. Precisely because boreal forests produce enormous volumes of harvestable fungal protein during late summer and autumn. Studies conducted at the University of Eastern Finland between 2015 and 2020 measured the caloric and protein yield per hectare of managed forest foraging and found that in productive seasons, wild mushroom harvests could deliver between 50 and 80 kilograms of dry protein equivalent per hectare, without a single agricultural input, no fertilizer, no tilled soil, no irrigation, no seed stock. Just functioning forest ecology doing what it has done for 300 million years. And yet most people in the English-speaking world could not identify a single safe wild mushroom species if their next meal depended on it. And that gap is not accidental. The global protein industry, encompassing beef, poultry, pork, to dairy and supplements, generates over $700 billion in annual revenue. That figure depends on a single behavioral assumption that consumers believe protein must be purchased, not found, not harvested from public land. Purchased, packaged, branded, and sold through a supply chain that adds cost at every stage. You cannot patent a wild mushroom. You cannot trademark a species that grows on 5 continents. You cannot build a subscription model around something that fruits on public forest land. And you certainly cannot justify a $12 package of protein powder when the active nutritional compounds are growing on a dead log in the nearest state park. The answer is not a conspiracy. It is something more ordinary and honestly more frustrating: economics. The incentive structure of modern food systems does not reward free. It punishes it. When you search for high-protein foods online, the first 2 pages of results are dominated by content funded by the meat and supplement industries. Beef councils, dairy associations, whey protein brands, they spend millions annually on search engine optimization. Wild mushrooms do not have a marketing board. They do not buy Google ads. The information exists, but it is buried on page 8 in a university extension PDF that no algorithm is incentivized to surface. Go deeper. Look at how nutrition is taught in schools. The protein section of every standardized food pyramid features meat, dairy, eggs, legumes, and nuts. Fungi, an entire biological kingdom with tens of thousands of edible species, are either absent or filed under vegetables, stripping them of their protein identity. A child growing up in the American or British education system can name 15 brands of protein bar, but cannot name a single wild mushroom that is safe to eat. That is not a failure of curiosity. It is a failure of curriculum design shaped by decades of industry lobbying. Now look at how foraging itself has been culturally repositioned. In Eastern Europe, mushroom hunting remains a mainstream family activity. In much of the English-speaking world, it has been rebranded as either a dangerous fringe hobby for survivalists or an elite artisanal practice for expensive restaurants. Both framings accomplish the same thing. They keep ordinary people away from a free, abundant, nutrient-dense food source. Yes, some wild mushrooms are toxic. Yes, misidentification can be harmful. But the same is true of dozens of activities we teach children without hesitation. Swimming, cycling, using a kitchen knife. The risk is real, but manageable, and it is grotesquely exaggerated relative to the actual statistical incidence of mushroom poisoning in countries where foraging is culturally normalized. To be fair, the modern protein industry does deliver genuine advantages. Commercial protein sources offer year-round availability, standardized nutritional labeling, convenience, and shelf stability that wild foraged foods cannot match. If you need a precise macro split for a training program and zero variability in your daily intake, packaged protein is more practical. But for the vast majority of people, those who simply want affordable, nutritious food, the forest is offering something the grocery store cannot beat on any metric except convenience. And that convenience costs you $8 to $15 per kilogram of protein that the nearest oak tree is producing for free. Here is exactly how to begin. Start with chicken of the woods, Laetiporus sulphureus, because it is one of the easiest wild mushrooms on Earth to identify, and one of the hardest to confuse with anything dangerous. It grows in shelf-like clusters on dead or dying hardwood trees, primarily oak, cherry, and beech. The fruiting body is vivid orange on top and bright sulfur yellow on the underside when fresh. There is no other shelf fungus in the northern hemisphere with that exact color combination at that size. The brackets can range from 10 centimeters to over 60 centimeters across, and a single cluster often weighs between 2 and 10 kilograms. Harvest timing matters. Pick the mushroom when the edges are still soft and the flesh has a faint smell like lemon or melon. If the edges are brittle, dry, and pale, the fruiting body is past its prime, still safe, but tough and less palatable. Use a sharp knife and cut the brackets at the base where they meet the wood. Leave the inner portion attached to the tree. The mycelium inside the wood will continue to produce new fruiting bodies in subsequent seasons if the wood remains undisturbed. Take your harvest home and brush off debris with a dry cloth. Do not soak chicken of the woods. It absorbs moisture rapidly and turns spongy. Slice the brackets into strips roughly 1 centimeter thick. For immediate cooking, saute the strips in a dry pan over medium-high heat for 3 to 4 minutes per side until golden. Then add oil or butter and season as you would any protein. The texture is remarkably close to cooked chicken breast. For long-term storage, arrange sliced strips on a baking sheet and dehydrate at 60 degrees Celsius for 6 to 8 hours until completely dry and brittle. Store in airtight glass jars in a cool, dark place. They will keep for 12 months or more. To rehydrate, soak in warm water for 20 to 30 minutes before cooking. For protein optimization, the dried form is your highest density option. Grind dried chicken of the woods in a blender to create a mushroom powder that can be added to soups, stews, sauces, or smoothies. 2 tablespoons, roughly 15 grams, delivers approximately 3 to 4 grams of protein, plus significant beta-glucans, B vitamins, and bioavailable minerals. A full season of foraging, even in a modest woodland, can yield enough dried mushroom protein to supplement a household's intake for months. Your total cost: a knife, a cloth bag, and an afternoon. Compare that to the alternative. A kilogram of commercial dried mushroom powder retails for between $30 and $70. A kilogram of whey protein isolate averages $25 to $40. A kilogram of grass-fed beef costs roughly $15 to $20 and delivers comparable protein per dry weight, but requires refrigeration, has a shelf life of days, and carries an environmental footprint measured in thousands of liters of water per kilogram produced. The wild mushroom requires none of this. It grows on ecological waste, it decomposes what is already dead, and it converts that decomposition into food. Roman foragers knew how to read a forest for edible fungi. Song Dynasty herbalists cataloged the protein-bearing species of southern China. Finnish families have been filling autumn baskets with chanterelles and boletes for as long as there have been Finnish families. Your great-grandparents almost certainly knew which trees fruited edible mushrooms and which weeks to look. That knowledge is not gone. It was displaced, and the forest has not stopped producing. Self-reliance does not begin at the hardware store or the supplement aisle. Sometimes it begins with learning to see what was growing right in front of you all along. Every share of this video puts a crack in the wall built around knowledge that was never anyone's to lock away. If this changed how you think about the food growing in your nearest forest, subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss what we uncover next. Every like tells the algorithm this matters more than another ad. Stay curious, stay self-reliant. I will see you in the next one.